Do you believe in miracles or do you believe in coincidence? In the year 1885, high in the wild Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, a man had stopped believing in both, until a blizzard brought a nun to his door and changed everything. The wind didn't just move across the mountain peaks, it hunted. It tore through the valleys with teeth of ice, scraping the earth raw and pushing cold deep into the bones of anything unlucky enough to be caught beneath its fury. Through that wind, a small figure moved. A woman in a gray habit, torn and mud-stained, stumbled through snow that reached her knees. Her feet were bare, the thin soles of her shoes having given out miles ago. In her arms, she clutched a wooden cross, the only possession she had left from a life she was running from. Sister Celeste Rourke had been walking for 4 days, maybe 5. Time blurred when your body was beyond exhaustion, when the cold felt like knives pressing into your skin. She couldn't feel her toes anymore. That was probably a mercy. Behind her, somewhere in the storm, she knew they were searching. She had heard the taunts on the second day, their barking carried on the wind like a promise of capture. But the blizzard had been her ally, covering her tracks, hiding her path. If they caught her, she would never be free again. She knew what Brother Matthias Crow did to women who tried to escape. She had seen it. She had heard the screams. And she would rather die in this frozen wilderness than return to that place they called salvation. Her knee hit the ground. The fall was sudden, her legs simply refusing to carry her another step. A cry rose in her throat, but she swallowed it down. Crying wasted warmth. Crying wasted water. She pushed herself up, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the cross. Just ahead, through the curtain of snow, she saw it. A thin ribbon of smoke rising into the gray sky. Where there was smoke, there was fire. And where there was fire, there was shelter. Celeste forced her legs to move. One step, then another. The shape of a cabin emerged from the gloom. Rough-hewn logs weathered to iron gray. A small corral with 2 horses, their heads down against the wind. No other buildings nearby. No neighbors. She had no idea if the person inside would help her or harm her. But at least it wasn't the open mountain. At least it was a chance. She reached the door. There was no porch, just a single flat stone dragged into place as a step. Her hand hovered over the rough wood. Then she knocked. The sound was barely a whisper against the storm. She waited, teeth chattering so hard her jaw ached. She knocked again, harder, using the last of her strength. "Please," she whispered against the door. "Please." A latch clicked. The door opened slowly, pulled inward. A tall man filled the frame, blocking the orange glow of fire behind him. He wore a heavy wool coat and a battered hat pulled low. In his right hand was a Winchester rifle, held easy but ready. He didn't speak. He just looked. His face was a map of hard miles, maybe mid-30s. Wind and sun had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, and his hair, dark and long, was tied back. A scar cut from his temple into his beard. His eyes were a deep blue, dark as a winter sky, and utterly unreadable. His shoulders were broad as a doorframe. His hands, wrapped around that rifle, were large and scarred from work. Celeste tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The warmth from inside hit her suddenly, and the room tilted. She felt herself falling. "Help me," she rasped. The man didn't move at first. He looked past her, scanning the horizon for others. A husband. A posse. Trouble. Seeing nothing but the barren plains and falling snow, he looked back at her torn habit, at her bleeding hands, at her blue lips. Something flickered in his expression. Not pity, maybe recognition, maybe resignation. He stepped back an inch and lowered the rifle. "Come in before you let all the heat out," he said. His voice sounded like gravel under a wagon wheel. Celeste stumbled inside. Her legs buckled and she pitched forward. He didn't catch her, but he grabbed her arm to steady her against the doorframe. His grip was firm, careful. The touch of someone who knew his own strength. "Sit," he ordered, nodding toward a small table near the cast iron stove. The cabin was a single room, clean, sparse, warm. The stove glowed in the corner, filling the space with blessed heat. A narrow bed was pushed against the far wall. Saddles hung from pegs. Everything was functional. Everything was simple. This was the home of a man who needed very little from the world. He handed her a tin cup of cold water. She drank greedily, quaffing as she swallowed. He ladled hot stew into a chipped bowl and set it before her without a word. Eat slow, he said. She tried, but hunger made it impossible. Her hands shook as she lifted the spoon. The stew was simple, rabbit and root vegetables, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted. When she finished, he finally asked the question, "Where did you come from?" "Silver Creek," she said, though her voice was barely a whisper. "That's 3 days walking, maybe 4. She stared at her bleeding knuckles. I had nowhere else to go. He watched her, reading her like a trail sign. The bruises on her wrists, the way she flinched when he shifted his weight, the way she kept her eyes down, except when she looked at the door, checking for pursuit. "You're running from something," he said. It wasn't a question. Celeste didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. The man sighed and crossed his arms. The firelight caught the hard planes of his face, softening them just slightly. "Name's Josiah Brennan," he said. "Most folks used to call me Bear." Celeste looked up at that. Bear. It fit. He was built like one, strong, solid, dangerous if provoked. But there was something else in his eyes. Something tired. Something that understood running. "Celeste," she whispered. "Sister Celeste Rourke." Josiah's eyes flicked to the wooden cross she still clutched. He nodded once, as if that explained everything. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. "But tomorrow morning, you head for the stage road. I'll point you where to go." Her stomach dropped. The stage road was 2 days on foot. She wouldn't survive it. Not in this cold, not in her condition. She needed to stay. She needed warmth, food, shelter. And she had nothing to trade except the one thing men always wanted. She stood, legs trembling. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She had to try. She had to offer the only thing she had left. "Mr. Brennan," she whispered. He looked up from the fire. Her voice cracked. "I'm not worth much, but I'll do anything for a roof over my head." The room went still. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Josiah's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists at his sides. For a moment, Celeste thought he might throw her out into the storm. Instead, his voice came low and sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "No," he said, "not here." And the look in his eyes was not desire. It was anger. Anger at the world that had made her believe that was all she was worth. Celeste felt tears burn her eyes. She sank back into the chair, covering her face with her hands. She had been so certain, so sure that this was how the world worked. You gave men what they wanted, and they let you survive another day. But this man, this stranger with the scarred hands and the tired eyes, had refused her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I have nothing else." "Nothing." Josiah moved to the stove, his back to her. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, gentler. "You have yourself," he said. "That's more than nothing. And you don't owe me anything for a night's shelter. A person either gives it or doesn't." Celeste lowered her hands and looked at him. Really looked, at the set of his shoulders, at the way he kept his distance, giving her space, at the old rosary hanging on the wall, worn smooth from years of prayers. This was not a man who took what he wanted. This was a man who carried his own ghosts. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" Josiah turned to face her. The firelight cast shadows across his face, making him look older, sadder. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago," he said. "And nobody did." He gestured to the bed. "You take that. I'll sleep in the chair." Celeste shook her head. "I'll sleep on the floor. Not in this cold." "Take the bed." She hesitated, then stood slowly and crossed to the narrow cot. It was firm, clean, smelling faintly of cedar. Not the smell of cheap perfume and stale cigars she had grown used to at New Eden Ministry. She sat lightly on the corner, unsure if she had the right. Josiah dropped into the wooden chair near the door. He rested one boot on the lower rung, leaning back like a man who had done this every night for years. His rifle leaned against the wall within arm's reach. "You don't have to stay awake," Celeste said quietly. "I do." "Why?" "Because someone knocked on my door in the middle of a storm and told me she was willing to give up her dignity just for a roof." His voice was calm, almost too calm. "So I'm keeping watch, for both of us." Celeste stared at the floorboards. Her cheeks burned with shame. "I didn't know what else to offer," she whispered. "You shouldn't have to offer anything," he said. "Shelter is shelter, A person either gives it or doesn't. She lay back on the bed, pulling the thin blanket over herself. Exhaustion pulled her down fast, dragging her into the first real sleep she had known in days. Her last thought before darkness took her was that she shouldn't have survived this long. Maybe she was only alive because she had reached this cabin and this man instead of another. The storm grew louder through the night. Wind pushed against the cabin walls as if trying to rip them apart. Loose snow hissed along the window frame, but inside, by the glow of the fire, Celeste slept, and Josiah watched, just as he said he would. Morning came slow and gray. Celeste woke to the sound of an axe biting into wood. She sat up, disoriented for a moment, before remembering where she was. The cabin was empty. She looked out the small window and saw Josiah outside, splitting logs with steady, powerful strokes. Sweat gleamed on his forehead despite the cold. His coat was off, and she could see the breadth of his shoulders, the strength in his arms. He moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this work 1,000 times before. Beside him, hanging from a wooden frame, was a deer, freshly killed and dressed. He had gone hunting while she slept. For her. Josiah glanced up and saw her at the window. He gave a single nod of acknowledgement, then set the axe down and walked toward the cabin. When he stepped inside, he brought the cold with him, along with a smell of pine and snow. "Morning," he said. "Hope I didn't wake you." "No," Celeste said quietly. "Thank you. For the bed. Only one I got. I slept in the chair just fine." He nodded toward the rocking chair near the fire. Josiah moved to the small stove and began making breakfast. He mixed flour and water for pancakes, poured the batter into a cast iron pan over the fire. His movements were practiced, methodical. This was a man who had lived alone for a long time. Celeste stood, her legs still unsteady. "I should help." Josiah didn't turn around. "You should sit. You walk through a blizzard. Your body needs rest. I can't just sit while you do everything." He turned then, his blue eyes meeting hers. His gaze was steady, serious, but kind. "Sister, I'm not asking you to sit because I think you're useless. I'm asking because you're hurt. There's a difference, der Herrn." Celeste stopped. No one had spoken to her like that in a very long time. Like she was a person. Not a burden, not property, just a person who deserved rest. She sat back down. They ate in silence. The pancakes were simple, but good. Celeste ate slowly, savoring each bite. Josiah ate with the efficiency of someone who saw food as fuel, nothing more. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came from two people who understood that words were not always necessary. Finally, Celeste spoke. "You live here alone? 5 years now? By choice?" Josiah paused, his fork hovering over his plate. Then he set it down. "By necessity." Celeste looked at him. Soon. "I understand that." He met her gaze, and for a moment something passed between them. Recognition. Two people who had both run from something. Two people who carried weight they couldn't put down. Josiah shifted the subject, his voice lighter. "Your boots are done for. Can't walk anywhere in those." Celeste looked down. Her boots were ruined, the soles completely separated from the uppers. She hadn't even noticed. "I noticed," she said, and to her surprise she smiled. "Just a little." Josiah's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "I got an old pair that might fit. They're not pretty, but they'll keep your feet attached to your legs." Celeste's smile widened. "That's very specific. Mountain life, you learn to appreciate the basics." For the first time in days, Celeste laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Josiah stood and walked to a wooden trunk in the corner. He pulled out a pair of worn leather boots and brought them to her. They were too big, but with extra socks, they would work. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and turned back to the stove. Celeste looked around the cabin more carefully now. It was clean, but sparse. Functional. No decorations except for the rosary on the wall. It was old, the beads worn smooth from use. "Your rosary?" she asked, gesturing to it. Josiah followed her gaze. "My mother's. She passed 3 years back. I'm sorry. She was a good woman, prayed for me every day, even when I didn't deserve it." He paused, especially then. Celeste's voice softened. "I think that's what mothers do." Josiah looked at her. You got family, sister? Celeste's face fell. The light that had been there a moment ago dimmed. I had a sister, Lucy. She died 2 years ago. I'm sorry. They sat in silence again, but this time it was heavier, weighted with shared grief. Celeste looked down at the wooden cross in her lap. I became a nun to find meaning after she was gone, to save others. She gave a bitter laugh. Didn't work out the way I planned. Josiah didn't push. He just waited. Rarely does, he said finally. Later that morning, Josiah went outside to continue his work. Celeste stayed inside, but she couldn't sit still. She looked around the cabin and saw his coat hanging by the door. The shoulder was torn, the fabric frayed. She found his sewing kit, a simple bachelor's collection of needle and thread, and sat down to mend it. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She had learned to sew as a girl, and later, working in the settlement houses of Baltimore, she had mended countless garments for families who couldn't afford new ones. The stitches were small and even, professional. When Josiah came back inside, he saw the coat. He picked it up, examining the repair. You did this? Celeste looked up, nervous. I hope you don't mind. I just needed to do something useful. Josiah ran his fingers over the stitches. This is good work. Real good. He looked at her. Where did you learn? My mother taught me, before she left. Celeste paused. And I worked in a settlement house in Baltimore. You learn to make things last. Josiah put the coat on. It fit better than it ever had. Thank you, he said. And he meant it. Celeste felt something warm settle in her chest. For the first time in 2 years, she felt useful, valued, not just as a body to be used, but as a person with skills, with worth. You strong enough to walk a bit? Josiah asked. I think so. Wybio, need to check my traps. Could use an extra pair of hands, if you're willing. Celeste was surprised. He wasn't treating her like an invalid. He was treating her like a partner. Yes, she said, I'd like that. They walked through the snowy forest together. Josiah moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew this land like the back of his hand. He showed her how to read tracks in the snow. Deer, rabbit, wolf. He pointed out edible plants hidden beneath the white. He explained how to set traps, how to check them without leaving scent. Celeste found herself learning quickly. She had always been observant. It was a skill she had developed working with families in poverty. You learned to see the details. Who was really hungry? Who was being hurt? Who needed help but wouldn't ask? See that? Josiah pointed to a tree trunk, bark scratched vertical. Bear marking territory. How recent? Celeste asked. Josiah looked at her, impressed by the question. Good question. He examined the tree. Sap still fresh, maybe 2 days. Celeste nodded, filing the information away. You got sharp eyes, Josiah said. I was trained to observe. In my old work. What kind of work? I helped families in poverty. Lots of them. You learn to see details. Josiah looked at her with new respect. That's important work. It was, Celeste said quietly, until I thought I could do more good in a convent. They reached one of Josiah's traps. There was a rabbit inside, already dead. Josiah removed it quickly and cleanly, resetting the trap with practiced hands. Celeste watched without flinching. Most city folk can't stomach this part, Josiah said. I've seen worse, Celeste said. Her voice was flat, much worse. Josiah stopped. He turned to look at her. Really look at her. Who were you running from, sister? Celeste's face hardened. The moment of peace shattered. She was silent for a long time, staring at the snow. People who called themselves holy, she said finally, but used God's name to do the devil's work. Josiah's jaw tightened. Anger flickered in his eyes. Sounds like coal bosses I used to know. Different collar, same evil. Celeste looked at him sharply. You worked for coal companies? Josiah met her eyes, unflinching. Honest, I did, as an enforcer, beat men who were just trying to feed their families. One of them died because of me. His voice was rough. That's why I'm up here. Penance. Celeste studied him. There was no judgment in her eyes, only understanding. Do you think penance works? She asked quietly. That we can be forgiven? Josiah looked at the mountains, at the endless white stretching in every direction. I don't know about forgiveness, he said, but I know we can try to do better. Celeste nodded slowly. Then maybe there's hope for both of us. They walked back to the cabin in silence, but it was a different silence now. The silence of two people who had seen each other's sorrows and not looked away. That evening, they sat by the fire. Josiah cooked the rabbit from the trap, and they ate together. The wind howled outside, but inside, the cabin was warm. Safe. Josiah finally broke the silence. "You don't have to tell me," he said. "But who's looking for you?" Celeste put her fork down. Her hands were shaking slightly. "A man named Brother Matthias Crow." Josiah waited. Celeste took a breath. "2 years ago, I found New Eden Ministry. Or they found me. Brother Matthias promised purpose, community, salvation. After Lucy died, I was lost. I wanted to believe in something." Her voice was hollow. "At first, it was beautiful. We prayed, we helped the poor, we lived simply. It felt real. What changed? Everything." Celeste's eyes were distant, remembering. "Matthias started isolating us. No letters, no visitors. He said the world was corrupting, that we needed to be pure. Then he started arranging marriages." Josiah's hands tightened on his cup. "He called them holy unions," Celeste continued. "But they were transactions. Men would come, they would pay him, and he would give them one of us. If we refused, we were locked in the cellar, starved, beaten, told we were impure, that we needed to be cleansed." Josiah's voice was deadly quiet. "How many women?" 14 that I know of, maybe more." Celeste looked at him. "I tried to leave twice before. Failed. This time, Sister Margaret helped me. She created a distraction so I could run." "Where is she now?" "Still there." Celeste's voice broke. "I don't know if Matthias found out she helped me. If he did..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "We'll get her out," Josiah said. Celeste looked at him, surprised. "We? You're not going back alone. And we're not leaving her there." Suddenly there was a sound outside. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Dogs. Josiah was on his feet instantly. He moved to the window and looked out into the darkness. Celeste stood, her heart pounding. "How many men does Matthias have?" Josiah asked, his voice calm but focused. 6, maybe 8. Celeste's voice was shook. "Silas, his brother, leads them. They're hunters. They'll track me." Josiah was already moving, loading his rifle, checking his ammunition. "Then we make sure they don't find you." "You can't fight them all," Celeste said. "You should give me up." Josiah stopped. He turned to face her, his eyes hard as stone. "Listen to me. I spent 5 years running from what I did. I'm not running anymore. And I sure as hell am not handing a woman over to men like that. You don't even know me. Don't need to. I know enough." He turned back to his preparations. "Now you know how to shoot?" Celeste hesitated. "My father taught me, a long time ago." Josiah handed her a pistol. "It'll come back." He showed her how to load it, how to aim, how to brace for the recoil. Celeste's hands shook at first, but as she went through the motions, muscle memory returned. Josiah set up a tin can on the far side of the cabin. She fired. The shot was loud in the enclosed space, but the can flew off the shelf. Josiah nodded approval. "Good." Celeste stared at the gun in her hands. She had never thought she would hold a weapon again. But freedom was worth more than any vow. The torches were closer now. Josiah could see them through the trees, moving like fireflies in the darkness. 4, maybe 5 men. He turned to Celeste. "Stay behind me. If anyone gets through, you shoot. Understand?" She nodded. The voices came next. Rough, confident. "Brennan," a man's voice cut through the night. "We know you got her. Send the sister out. This ends peaceful." Josiah didn't respond. He checked his rifle one more time. The voice came again, colder now. "We don't want trouble, Mountain Man. The sister is confused. She needs care." "Send her out," Celeste whispered. "That's Silas, Matthias's brother. He's the worst." Josiah opened the shutter an inch and shouted back, his voice carrying across the snow. "Sister Celeste is not stolen. She's a free woman who walked to my door. Now get off my land." A laugh echoed back. "Free? Brother Matthias owns her. She's bound by holy vows. Only vows I recognize are ones made freely." Josiah's voice was iron. "Now I'm going to count to 10. You're not gone by then. I start shooting. You're 1 man, Brennan. We're 5. You do the math." 1, Josiah said. Celeste could hear the men moving. spreading out. 2. They won't leave, she whispered. 3. Josiah handed her the pistol. Back door. Anyone comes through, you shoot. 4. 5. A boot kicked at the back door, hard. Celeste jumped, but she held her ground, aiming the pistol with both hands. 6. 7. The kicking stopped. Silence. 8. 9. Son. 10. Josiah fired through the front window. The shot was a warning, hitting a tree near the men. They scattered. Return fire came immediately, bullets thudding into the cabin walls. Celeste ducked, her heart in her throat. Stay low, Josiah shouted. He fired again. This time a man screamed. Josiah had hit him in the shoulder. Not fatal, but disabling. The man went down. You shot my man! Silas's voice was furious. Next one won't be in the shoulder. Leave, now! There was a long pause. Then the sound of horses, men mounting up, riding away, but Silas's voice carried back one last time. This isn't over, Brennan. Brother Matthias will come himself, and when he does, you'll wish you'd handed her over. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the night. Silence settled over the cabin like fresh snow. Josiah lowered his rifle. He checked the windows one more time, making sure they were really gone. Then he turned to Celeste. She was still holding the pistol, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. She lowered it slowly and sank against the wall. You did good, Josiah said, crossing to her. He gently took the gun from her hands. I almost shot, she said, her voice breaking. I had my finger on the trigger. But you didn't. You waited. That's discipline. Celeste looked up at him. You've done this before. Fought like this. Josiah sat down next to her, not crowding her, just being present. Different circumstances. Same principle. Protect what matters. I'm not your responsibility. No, but you're under my roof. That makes it my business. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Celeste did something that surprised them both. She reached out and touched his hand. Josiah looked at her hand on his, then at her face. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Really? Josiah was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was honest, raw. 5 years ago, I stood by while a man died. I could have stopped it. I didn't. He looked at her. I can't change that. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again. Not on my watch. You think saving me absolves you? No, nothing absolves me. But it's a start. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed his hand. Then we're both looking for redemption. Josiah's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. Guess so. They sat by the fire as the wind died down outside. The storm was passing, and for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt quite so alone. Sometimes two lost people find each other at exactly the right time, not to fill the emptiness, but to walk the road home together. And that night, in a small cabin high in the Appalachian Mountains, two people who had stopped believing in miracles began to believe again. Not in divine intervention, but in something simpler, something harder, in each other. Morning came cold and clear. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the world wrapped in fresh snow that sparkled like broken glass in the early light. Inside the cabin, Josiah was already awake, stoking the fire, preparing coffee. He moved quietly, trying not to wake Celeste, who still slept in the bed he had given her. But she was already stirring. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, along with the reality of what had happened the night before. The gunfight, the threats, the promise that Brother Matthias himself would come. She sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Through the window, she could see Josiah outside, chopping wood. Even in the freezing morning air, he worked without his coat. His breath came out in white clouds. The muscles in his shoulders and arms moved with each swing of the axe. There was something reassuring about watching him work, something solid, dependable. He glanced up and saw her at the window. A brief nod. Nothing more. But it was enough. When he came back inside, he brought the cold with him, along with the smell of pine and fresh-cut wood. Morning, he said, handing her a cup of coffee. Sleep all right? Better than I have in 2 years. They ate breakfast in companionable silence. Pancakes again, simple but good. Celeste found herself studying Josiah when he wasn't looking. The way he moved with such economy. No wasted motion, No unnecessary words. He was a man who had learned to live with only what he needed. They'll be back, Josiah said finally, breaking the silence. Maybe not today, but soon. I know. We can't stay here forever. He looked at her directly. We need to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere with witnesses, with law. Celeste set down her fork. Where is safe? Matthias has money, influence. People believe him. Then we make them stop believing. Josiah stood and walked to the window. There's a town, Harper's Ridge, 8 miles from here. Sheriff there is Ruth Donovan. She's fair, tough. If anyone will listen, it's her. And if she doesn't, then we find another way. But sitting here waiting for Matthias to come with an army isn't a plan. It's suicide. Celeste considered this. She had run for so long. The idea of walking into a town, of facing people, of telling her story, terrified her. But Josiah was right. Hiding wouldn't save her, or Margaret, or any of the others. All right, she said. We go to Harper's Ridge. They prepared quickly. Josiah packed supplies into a leather satchel. Food, ammunition, a blanket, water. Celeste dressed in the borrowed clothes he had given her. His old work shirt rolled at the sleeves. Pants that were too big but held up with a belt. The boots that almost fit. She caught her reflection in the small mirror by the door and barely recognized herself. She didn't look like Sister Celeste anymore. She looked like a woman who had survived something terrible and was still standing. Before they left, she picked up her wooden cross from the table. She held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then she put it in her pocket. Not around her neck, not yet. She wasn't sure what it meant to her anymore. Wasn't sure if she had the right to wear it. Josiah noticed but said nothing. The trail to Harper's Ridge followed the ridgeline, staying high above the valley floor. Josiah explained that the main road would be too exposed, too easy for Matthias's men to watch. Up here, they could see anyone coming from miles away. The sun was bright, the sky a hard blue. Their breath came out in white plumes. The snow crunched under their boots with each step. Josiah moved with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of this land. Celeste followed, her body still sore but stronger than it had been days ago. How long? She asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. He glanced back at her. You holding up? I walked 4 days through a blizzard to get away from him. I can manage 8 miles to face him. Josiah's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. That's the spirit. They walked in silence for a while. The only sounds were the crunch of snow, the occasional call of a crow, the whisper of wind through the bare branches. It was peaceful in a way that surprised Celeste. She had forgotten what peace felt like. Tell me about Harper's Ridge, she said. Small mining town, maybe 200 people. Coal mostly. Some farming on the edges. Good people for the most part. And Sheriff Donovan? Ruth, Josiah's voice carried respect. Her husband was sheriff before her. Died in a mine collapse about 6 years back. She took the badge and never looked back. She doesn't suffer fools, and she doesn't take bribes. If there's anyone in that town who will stand up to Matthias, it's her. You sound like you know her well. I did, once, before I came to the mountain. Celeste wanted to ask more, but something in Josiah's tone told her this wasn't the time. They walked on. After about 2 hours, they stopped to rest on a flat outcropping of rock. Josiah handed her some dried meat and hardtack. Not fancy, but it gave them energy. Below, they could see the valley spreading out, white and pristine. It's beautiful, Celeste said quietly. It is. Josiah looked out over the landscape. That's why I stayed. Up here, the world makes sense. No lies, no pretending, just survival. Is that enough? Just survival? He was quiet for a long moment. It was. For a while. But maybe there's supposed to be more. Before Celeste could respond, Josiah stiffened. His hand went to his rifle. What is it? Riders? 3 of them. Coming up the trail behind us. Celeste's heart jumped into her throat. She turned to look. 3 horsemen were indeed approaching, moving at a steady pace. For a moment, panic seized her. But then Josiah relaxed slightly. It's all right, I know the lead rider. The 3 men drew closer. The one in front was old, his face like carved mahogany, deeply lined with age and weather. He had long gray hair and wore buckskin clothing that looked like it had been made by hand. His eyes were dark and sharp, taking in everything. The two men behind him were younger, similarly dressed. Josiah Brennan, the old man said, reining in his horse. His voice carried the trace of an accent. Cherokee, Celeste realized. Been a long time, Bear. Red Skywalker. Josiah inclined his head with clear respect. Didn't expect to see you out here. The old man's eyes shifted to Celeste, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through to her soul. Been tracking some men through my land, Red Sky said. Bad men, hunters, looking for something. His gaze didn't leave Celeste. Or someone. How many? Josiah's voice was tight. 6 men, led by a man in black. Fancy clothes, calls himself Brother Matthias. The name hit Celeste like a physical blow. Her breath caught. Where are they now? Josiah asked. Red Sky pointed down toward the valley. They rode into Harper's Ridge about an hour ago, asking questions, looking for a woman, a nun who ran away. Celeste felt the world tilt. He's already there. Red Sky looked at Josiah. This woman, she's a friend of yours? She's under my protection. The old man studied them both for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Then you're walking into a fight, old friend. That man has power in the town. Money. People listen to him, and he's not the kind who gives up. I know. Red Sky reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather pouch. He tossed it to Josiah, who caught it one-handed. Herbs. For wounds. You'll need them. Josiah nodded his thanks. Be careful, Bear, Red Sky said. Men who hide behind God's name are the most dangerous kind. They think they can't be touched. Then he and his companions turned their horses and rode back the way they had come, disappearing into the trees as silently as they had appeared. Celeste looked at Josiah. What do we do now? Now we go talk to Ruth. Fast. Before Matthias knows we're in town. They descended into the valley, approaching Harper's Ridge from the north side. The town was larger than Celeste had expected. A main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a white steeple, a general store, a saloon, a hotel, houses scattered on the outskirts. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their Saturday business. Josiah led her along the back streets, keeping them out of sight as much as possible. A few people glanced at them with curiosity, but most paid them no mind. Just another couple of travelers passing through. They were almost to the sheriff's office when a voice called out, Well, well, if it isn't the legendary Bear Brennan himself. Josiah stopped. Celeste felt him tense like a coiled spring. A man stepped out from the shadow of a building. He was tall and lean, dressed in expensive black clothing that stood out sharply against the rough frontier town. His face was handsome in a cold, chiseled way. Pale eyes, a smile that didn't reach those eyes. Around his neck hung a large gold cross. Brother Matthias Crow. Sister Celeste, Matthias said, his voice dripping with false warmth. My dear child, thank the Lord you're safe. We've been so worried about you. He started walking toward them, his arms open as if to embrace her. Josiah stepped between them, his hand moving to the rifle on his back. Matthias stopped, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. His smile never wavered. And you must be the Good Samaritan who found her. Brother Matthias Crow. I run New Eden Ministry. Sister Celeste is one of our flock. She wandered away during the storm. Poor thing. We've been searching everywhere. She's not going back, Josiah said flatly. Matthias's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Then it returned, even brighter. I understand your concern, friend. Truly. But the poor dear has been through such trauma. She's confused, feverish. She needs proper medical care. We have doctors at the ministry. Celeste stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. I didn't wander away. I escaped. A murmur rippled through the people on the street. They had stopped now, sensing drama unfolding. Matthias turned to the gathering crowd, his expression shifting to one of profound sadness. You see, friends? The poor girl is clearly unwell. Delirious. She needs rest and prayer, not to be encouraged in these fantasies. Margaret helped me escape from you, Celeste said, her voice growing stronger. She risked everything to help me get away from what you're doing to those women. Matthias spread his hands to the crowd. This is what fever does, friends. It twists the mind, creates false memories. Sister Celeste is a troubled soul. I pray for her recovery. He reached for Celeste's arm. Josiah's hand shot out, grabbing Matthias's wrist in an iron grip. Touch her and lose the hand. The street went completely silent. The two men stood locked, eyes meeting. For a moment, violence hung in the air like electricity before a lightning strike. That's enough, a woman's voice cut through the tension like a knife. She strode toward them from the direction of the sheriff's office. Tall, maybe 50 years old, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a badge on her chest and a Colt revolver on her hip. Her face was weathered and hard, but her eyes were intelligent and missed nothing. Sheriff Ruth Donovan. Matthias, Brennan, step back, both of you. Now. Both men released their grips and stepped apart. Ruth walked between them, her gaze sweeping over Celeste. You all right, miss? Celeste nodded, finding her voice. Sheriff, I need to report a crime. Matthias's voice was smooth as oil. Sheriff Donovan, I apologize for this disturbance. This is Sister Celeste. She's been missing from our ministry for 5 days. As you can see, she's clearly unwell. I only want to help her. Ruth held up a hand, silencing him without even looking at him. I'll decide who's unwell, Matthias. Her eyes stayed on Celeste. Come with me, inside. We'll talk. I have a right to be present when, Matthias began. You've got no rights here except the ones I give you. Ruth's voice was iron. This is my jurisdiction. Now clear the street before I arrest you for obstruction. She escorted Celeste and Josiah into her office, leaving Matthias standing on the street. For just a moment, his mask slipped. Pure rage flashed across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by his benevolent smile. He waved to the townspeople and walked calmly toward the church. But Celeste had seen it, the real Matthias, and she knew he wouldn't let this go. Ruth's office was small and utilitarian. A scarred wooden desk, 2 chairs, a gun rack on the wall, 2 cells in the back, currently empty. Wanted posters covered one wall. Ruth gestured for them to sit. Then she settled into her chair and looked at Celeste. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Celeste took a deep breath. 2 years ago, my sister Lucy died of a drug overdose in Baltimore. I was working as a social worker at the time. I couldn't save her. After she died, I felt lost, empty. I wanted to help people, to find meaning. That's when I heard about New Eden Ministry. Ruth listened, her face impassive, taking notes. Brother Matthias came to Baltimore on a recruiting trip. He was so charismatic, so convincing. He talked about building a community of faith and service, about helping the poor, about living simply and finding purpose. Celeste's voice grew harder. I believed him. I joined willingly. At first, everything was just as he promised. We prayed together. We ran a soup kitchen. We helped orphans. It felt real. What changed? Matthias started slowly isolating us. First, he said we should limit contact with the outside world to focus on our spiritual development. Then he stopped allowing visitors. Then he took our letters. He said it was to protect us from worldly corruption. We believed him. Ruth wrote steadily. Then the marriages started. Matthias said God had revealed to him that some of us were meant for holy matrimony. Men started coming to the ministry. Rich men, powerful men. They would meet with Matthias in his office. Money would change hands. And then one of the sisters would be told she was being married. Celeste's voice shook. If we refused, we were locked in the cellar, starved, beaten, told we were sinful, impure, that we needed to be purified through obedience. Ruth's pen stopped. She looked up, her eyes hard. How many women? 14 that I know of, maybe more. Some disappeared. One, Anna Schmidt, was found dead in the river 3 years ago. I remember Anna, Ruth said quietly. It was ruled an accidental drowning. It wasn't an accident. Anna tried to escape. They hunted her down. I saw her body before they took it away. She had bruises around her throat, marks on her wrists like she'd been tied up. Those weren't from falling in a river. The room was silent for a moment. Josiah spoke up. Sister Margaret Flynn is still at the ministry. She helped Celeste escape. If Matthias knows she helped, her life is in danger. Ruth set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. She looked tired suddenly. Older. Here's the problem, she said. Matthias has influence, real influence. He donates thousands to the church, to the orphanage, to widows. He has friends in Charleston, politicians, judges. I go after him without ironclad proof. I'll be shut down before I even start. They'll say I'm persecuting a holy man based on the ravings of one disturbed woman. Then what am I supposed to do? Celeste's voice cracked. You stay here in town where I can protect you. I'll investigate quietly, talk to people, see if anyone else will come forward. But I need evidence. Real evidence. His word against yours won't hold up in court. There's someone you should meet, Ruth said, standing. Doc Carlisle. He's treated some of the women from New Eden over the years. Never said anything outright, but I've seen his face when they leave his office. He knows something. Ruth led them down the street to a small clinic. It smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. An older man with a gray beard and tired eyes sat at a desk, writing in a ledger. He looked up when they entered. Doc, Ruth said, this is Celeste. She needs examining. Doc Carlisle's eyes met Celeste's, and something flickered there. Recognition. Guilt. She's from New Eden, Ruth said quietly. The doctor's face went pale. He set down his pen carefully. I see. He gestured Celeste into an examination room. Josiah started to follow, but the doctor shook his head. Give us privacy, please. Inside the small room, Doc Carlisle examined her wrists, her ankles, the bruises on her arms. His touch was gentle, professional, but his hands shook slightly. How did you get these, he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. They chained us when we tried to resist. When we refused to comply, the doctor was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice heavy with shame. I've treated 6 women from New Eden in the past 3 years. Every single one had injuries. Broken ribs, burns. One had a fractured skull she claimed came from falling downstairs. Another had strangulation marks around her neck. Did you report it? Doc shook his head. I asked them what happened. They all gave the same answers. They fell. They were clumsy. Everything was fine at the ministry. His voice broke slightly. I knew they were lying. I knew someone was hurting them. But I was a coward. Matthias has power. Money. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that I had no proof. And now a girl braver than I'll ever be risked her life to tell the truth. The least I can do is back her up. He met her eyes. I'll testify. I'll write down everything I've seen, every injury, every lie. It might not be enough, but it's something. After the examination, Ruth took them to a large boarding house on the edge of town. The sign above the door read, Murphy's Respectable Lodging for Ladies. Inside, a formidable woman in her 50s stood behind the counter. She had steel gray hair, strong arms, and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Ada, Ruth said, this is Celeste. She needs a room, and she needs discretion. Ada Murphy looked Celeste up and down. Her gaze was sharp but not unkind. New Eden? Celeste nodded, surprised. How did you know? I know that look. Ada's voice was hard as stone. I've seen it in the mirror. My daughter went to a place like New Eden 8 years ago. Different name, different man, but the same evil underneath. She was told she'd find purpose and community. She found a cage instead. The room went quiet. She didn't come back, Ada said. By the time I found where she was already dead. They said she hung herself, but I never believed it. Tears stood in Ada's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She straightened her shoulders. You'll stay here, she said firmly. Top floor, back room, no charge. And if that bastard Matthias comes looking for you, he'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, that's a fight he doesn't want. Celeste felt her throat tighten. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just help me bring him down. That evening, Celeste sat in her small room at Murphy's. It was clean and warm, with a real bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. There was a knock at the door. Josiah entered, carrying her small bundle of possessions. Brought your things, he said. He crossed to the window and checked the latch, testing it. Old habit, making sure it's secure. You don't have to stay, Celeste said. I know, but you will anyway. I will. She stood and walked to him. They were close now, closer than they had been since that moment in the cabin. She could see the weariness in his eyes, the weight he carried. Why? She asked quietly. You've already done more than anyone had a right to ask. Josiah looked at her for a long moment. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. And it's been a very long time since I felt that way about anything. Celeste felt tears sting her eyes. When I look at you, I see someone who's already fought the hardest battle there is, the one against yourself, and you won. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face. His hand was rough, calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "We're going to get Margaret out," he said, "and the others. I promise you that. Together, together." They stood there, faces inches apart. Celeste could feel his breath warm on her skin. She wanted to close the distance, to kiss him, but something held her back. "Not yet," she whispered. "When this is over, when I'm truly free, when I'm not running anymore, then." Josiah nodded, understanding without her having to explain. Then he stepped back, putting distance between them. "I'll be downstairs. You need anything, you call." After he left, Celeste sat on the bed and pulled the wooden cross from her pocket. She stared at it in the lamplight, running her thumb over the worn wood. She wasn't sure what she believed anymore, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She believed in Josiah Brennan, and maybe that was a start. 10 miles north of Harper's Ridge at New Eden Ministry, Brother Matthias Crow sat in his private office. The room was richly appointed, expensive furniture, Persian rugs, a locked safe in the corner filled with money. It was a stark contrast to the bare, prison-like rooms where the sisters lived. His brother Silas stood before him, his arms still bandaged from Josiah's bullet. "She's with the sheriff now," Silas said. "We can't just grab her off the street." Matthias's fingers drummed on the desk. "No, but we can discredit her, make her look unstable, delusional." "How?" "Pastor Whitfield owes me several favors, large favors. He'll preach tomorrow about the dangers of false witness, about disturbed women who make wild accusations against godly men." Matthias smiled coldly. "By the time he's done, the whole town will think Celeste has lost her mind. And if that doesn't work?" Matthias opened a drawer and pulled out a leather ledger. Inside were names, dates, amounts paid, a complete record of every transaction he had ever made. "Half the prominent men in this valley are in this book," he said. "The mayor, 3 town councilmen, the owner of the general store, the head of the mining company. If Celeste pushes this, I'll threaten to expose them all. They'll turn on her to save themselves." "Smart," Silas said with an ugly grin. "Always." Matthias closed the ledger. "Now go get Margaret. Bring her to me." In the women's dormitory at New Eden, Sister Margaret knelt on the hard wooden floor, praying. She was young, barely 21, with blonde hair and frightened blue eyes. She had been praying for hours, begging God to protect Celeste, to keep her safe, to forgive Margaret for not being brave enough to run with her. The door opened. Matthias entered, his footsteps soft on the floor. "Sister Margaret." She didn't look up. "Brother Matthias, I know you helped Celeste escape." Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me, child. Lies are sins, and sins must be purified." Margaret kept her eyes on the floor, trembling. Matthias crouched down to her level. His hands shot out, grabbing her chin, forcing her to look at him. His grip was painful. "You will write a letter," he said, begging Celeste to return, telling her you were wrong to help her. "That I forgive you both. That she's sick and needs care." "I won't," Margaret whispered. Matthias's grip tightened until she whimpered. "Then you'll join Anna in the river. Your choice." He released her and stood. "I'll give you until morning to decide." He left, locking the door behind him. Margaret collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. She had been brave once, but bravery was so much harder when you were alone and terrified. Saturday passed in tense waiting. Celeste stayed at Murphy's, keeping out of sight. Ruth moved through town quietly, asking questions, gathering whispers. Doc Carlisle wrote out a formal statement detailing every injury he had treated and every lie he had accepted. Ada Murphy did something even more important. She went door to door, talking to the women of Harper's Ridge, asking if they had daughters or sisters who had disappeared, if they knew anyone who had gone to New Eden and never came back. Slowly, quietly, she built a network of grief and anger. Late that afternoon, Ruth stopped at the Methodist church. She found Pastor Samuel Whitfield alone in the sanctuary, kneeling before the altar. "Sam," she said quietly. The old minister looked up. He was 68, with kind eyes and a gentle face. But today he looked troubled. "Ruth, what brings you here? I need to know where you stand." The pastor stood slowly, his knees creaking. On what matter? On Brother Matthias? On New Eden Ministry? On the girl who says he's been selling women like livestock? Sam's face went pale. He walked to a pew and sat down heavily. Matthias came to see me yesterday. What did he want? He asked me to preach tomorrow, to defend him, to call Celeste Rourke a false witness, a disturbed woman making wild accusations. And will you? Sam was silent for a long moment. He has given so much to this church, Ruth. Thousands of dollars. We built the new orphanage with his donations. We feed a dozen families with his charity. Blood money, Ruth said flatly. Perhaps. Probably. Sam's voice was anguished. But if I speak against him, I lose everything. The church, my position, my credibility. And if you don't, you lose your soul. Sam looked at her with haunted eyes. What would you have me do? I'd have you remember why you became a minister in the first place. To serve God, to protect the weak, to speak truth even when it costs you everything. Ruth left him there, alone with his conscience. That evening, as darkness fell over Harper's Ridge, a young boy knocked on Celeste's door at Murphy's. He held out an envelope. Letter for you, miss. Man paid me to deliver it. Celeste took it with shaking hands. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Margaret's. Inside, the letter was brief and tear-stained. Celeste, please come back. I was wrong to help you. Brother Matthias forgives us both. He says you're sick, confused, but he can heal you. Please, sister, I'm so scared. If you don't come back, he says I'll have to take your place. Please don't leave me here alone. Margaret. Celeste's vision blurred with tears. A cry escaped her throat. Josiah, who had been downstairs with Ruth and Ada, came running. What is it? She showed him the letter. He read it, his jaw tightening with each word. It's a trap, I know, Celeste said, her voice breaking. But she's terrified, and it's because of me. It's because of Matthias. If I don't go back, he'll hurt her. If you go back, he wins. He'll have you both locked up in that compound, and we'll never get either of you out. Celeste paced the small room, her mind racing. Then what do I do? Let her suffer while I hide? Josiah caught her arm gently, stopping her. We get her out, but we do it smart. Celeste stopped. She looked at him, then at the letter, then back at him. Her mind began to work, the same sharp intelligence that had helped her survive 2 years at New Eden. He wants me to come back, she said slowly. That's his entire plan. Right. So what if I do? But not quietly, not alone. What if I confront him publicly? Tomorrow, at church, in front of the whole town. That's exactly what he expects. He'll make you look unstable, emotional, easy to dismiss. Or, Celeste continued, her voice growing stronger, I make him look evil. He's expecting me to be desperate, hysterical. But what if I'm calm? What if I have witnesses? Evidence? What if I don't just accuse him but prove it? What proof? Doc Carlisle's testimony, Ada and the other women who've lost daughters, even Pastor Whitfield, if he finds his courage. Josiah studied her, understanding dawning in his eyes. You want to put him on trial, not in a courthouse, in the court of public opinion. Exactly. If we can't get him through the law yet, we destroy his reputation, make it impossible for him to operate, show everyone who he really is. Josiah's mouth curved into something between a smile and a grimace. It's brilliant and dangerous as hell. I'm done being safe. Ruth, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. I can't officially sanction this, but I'll be there, in the back, watching. And if he steps out of line, if he threatens you or tries to take you by force, I'll have legal grounds to arrest him. Ada appeared behind her. I'll gather the women, every mother who's lost a daughter, every wife who's lost a sister. We'll fill that church. Matthias may have money and power, but we have numbers, and we have truth. Celeste looked at each of them in turn. These people, these near strangers, were willing to risk everything to stand with her, because they believed her, because they had seen their own loved ones destroyed by men like Matthias. Tomorrow morning, Celeste said, her voice steady and clear, I walk into that church, I sit in the front row. I let him see me, and when the moment is right, I stand up and I tell the truth, all of it, in front of everyone. And if he tries to take you by force, Josiah asked, then you stop him. Josiah checked his rifle, his movements precise and practiced. Count on it. That night, Celeste stood at her window, looking out over the dark town. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow she would face the man who had stolen 2 years of her life. The man who had convinced her she was worthless. The man who had made her believe that her body was the only thing she had to offer. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She had walked through a blizzard and survived. She had found people who believed in her. She had found her voice. And tomorrow, all of Harper's Ridge would hear it. Sometimes courage is not about fighting with fists or weapons. Sometimes courage is walking into a room full of enemies and speaking the truth. Sister Celeste Rourke was about to do exactly that, and the town would have to choose. Believe the powerful man with money and charm, or believe the woman who had nothing left to lose. The sun would rise on Sunday morning, and nothing in Harper's Ridge would ever be the same. Sunday morning broke cold and clear over Harper's Ridge. The sky was the pale blue of winter, sharp and clean. Church bells began to ring at 9 o'clock, their sound carrying across the valley, calling the faithful to worship. But this was no ordinary Sunday. In her room at Murphy's boarding house, Celeste stood before the small mirror, hardly recognizing herself. Ada had brought her a simple dress, dark blue calico, modest and plain. It fit reasonably well. Ada had also found a proper pair of boots, worn but sturdy. Celeste's hair, which had been wild and tangled from her days in the wilderness, was now clean and pulled back in a simple braid. She looked like a respectable woman. Not a nun, not a victim, just a woman preparing to tell the truth. Ada knocked softly and entered. "You ready?" Celeste took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be. Remember what we talked about. Stay calm. Don't let him provoke you. Just tell your story, plain and simple. The truth is powerful enough on its own." "What if they don't believe me?" "Then they don't. But at least you'll have spoken. At least Margaret will know you tried." Ada's weathered hand squeezed Celeste's shoulder. "And there are more people on your side than you think." Downstairs, Josiah waited. He had cleaned up as well. A fresh shirt, his beard trimmed. But the rifle was still slung across his back and the pistol was still at his hip. He looked up as Celeste descended the stairs. For a moment, he just stared. "You look different," he said finally. "Different good or different bad, different strong." Outside, the streets were already filling with people heading to church. Families in their Sunday best, miners who had scrubbed the coal dust from their hands and faces, children running ahead of their parents. It looked like any ordinary Sunday in any ordinary town. But nothing about today was ordinary. Ruth was waiting outside the church, standing to one side, watching the crowd. She caught Celeste's eye and gave a small nod. "I'll be in the back. You'll be fine." Doc Carlisle arrived, looking nervous but determined. He carried a leather folder under his arm, his medical records, his testimony. Then came the widows. Ada had gathered 12 women, all of them mothers or sisters who had lost someone. They arrived together, a silent wall of grief and determination. They didn't speak to Celeste, but their presence said everything. Finally, Pastor Samuel Whitfield appeared at the church door. His face was gray, troubled. He looked at Celeste, then at the gathering crowd, then at the skiway, as if asking God for guidance. Celeste couldn't tell which way he would go. At precisely 9:30, a black carriage rolled down the main street. Expensive, polished, drawn by 4 matched horses. The crowd parted to let it through. Brother Matthias Crowe stepped out, resplendent in his black suit and white clerical collar. The gold cross around his neck caught the morning sun. He looked every inch the holy man. Behind him came Silas and 3 other men, all armed. Then came the sisters, 14 women in gray habits, heads bowed, walking in a line. They looked like ghosts, like shadows of human beings. At the end of the line was Margaret. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Celeste, her expression crumbled. Hope and fear warred on her face. Celeste's heart broke. She took a step forward, but Josiah's hand on her arm stopped her. "Not yet," he murmured. "Wait." Matthias saw Celeste standing near the church steps. His smile widened. "Sister Celeste," he called out, his voice carrying across the crowd. "How wonderful to see you looking so well. I trust you've had time to recover from your ordeal." Celeste didn't respond. She simply looked at him, her face calm. Matthias's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance. He turned to the crowd. Friends, neighbors, it warms my heart to see so many gathered for worship this beautiful morning. Let us go inside and give thanks to the Lord. The congregation began filing into the church. Matthias and his sisters went first, taking up the pews on the right side. The townspeople followed, filling in around them. The widows sat together in the middle. Doc Carlyle took a seat near the aisle. Celeste walked down the center aisle. Every eye was on her. She could feel their stares, hear the whispers, but she kept her head high and her steps steady. She walked all the way to the front and sat in the first pew on the left side. Directly across from Matthias, Josiah sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Ruth stood in the back corner, arms crossed, watching everything. The church fell silent. Pastor Whitfield walked slowly to the pulpit. He gripped the edges with both hands, his knuckles white. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking out at his congregation. Then he spoke. Friends, neighbors, brothers and sisters in Christ. His voice was steady but strained. Today's sermon was supposed to be about faith and obedience, about trusting those who guide us spiritually, about not questioning the will of God. He paused and the silence stretched. But I can't give that sermon. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Matthias's smile froze on his face. I can't give that sermon, Pastor Whitfield continued, because this morning I was reminded that faith without truth is not faith at all. It's just compliance. And compliance to evil is sin. Matthias stood, his voice gentle but firm. Pastor Whitfield, perhaps we should discuss this in private before you say something you'll regret. Sit down, Matthias. Sam's voice was louder now, stronger. I've been a coward for too long. I've seen things that troubled me and said nothing. I've taken money from men whose actions contradicted their words. I've let fear silence my conscience. But no more. He looked directly at Celeste. Today, a woman sits in my church who has more courage than I've ever had. She walked through a blizzard to escape something terrible. She risked her life to tell the truth, and she deserves to be heard. He stepped aside from the pulpit and gestured to Celeste. Sister Celeste Rourke, would you speak? The church was utterly silent. Every eye turned to Celeste. She stood slowly, her legs steady despite the fear coursing through her. She walked to the front and turned to face the congregation. She didn't look at Matthias. She looked at the people, the ordinary people of Harper's Ridge, the ones who worked and struggled and tried to do right. My name is Celeste Rourke, she began, her voice clear. 2 years ago, I joined New Eden Ministry. I was grieving the death of my sister. I was lost. I was looking for purpose. Brother Matthias promised me community, faith, and service to God. She paused, letting the words settle. What I found was a prison. Murmurs rose. Matthias started to stand, but Silas pulled him back down, whispering urgently in his ear. For 2 years, I and 13 other women have been isolated, controlled, and sold, Celeste continued. Brother Matthias calls it holy matrimony, but these are not marriages. They are transactions. Men pay him money. He gives them women. If we refuse, we are beaten, starved, locked in cells, told we are sinful and must be purified through obedience. Her voice grew stronger. You all knew Anna Schmidt. She was found drowned in the river 3 years ago. You were told it was an accident. It wasn't. Anna tried to escape New Eden. She was hunted down. I saw her body before they took it away. She had bruises around her throat, marks on her wrist from being bound. Those were not the injuries of someone who fell. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Matthias stood, his voice smooth but edged with steel. My dear Celeste, you're clearly still suffering from your ordeal. The fever, the exposure, they've affected your mind. These are delusions brought on by trauma. Celeste turned to look at him for the first time. I'm not finished. Matthias's mask cracked slightly. You're disturbed. You need help, not encouragement in these fantasies. Sheriff Donovan's voice rang out from the back. Let her speak, Matthias. Matthias sat back down, his hands gripping the pew in front of him. Celeste turned back to the congregation. I'm not the only one who knows the truth. Sister Margaret Flynn, she pointed to where Margaret sat among the other gray-clad women, helped me escape. She risked everything to give me a chance at freedom. And now she's terrified because she knows what happens to women who defy him. All eyes turned to Margaret. The young woman was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Matthias's voice was commanding. Margaret, tell them. Tell them you're happy, that you're here of your own free will. Margaret opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was shaking so hard she could barely sit upright. Matthias's voice hardened. Margaret! Ada Murphy stood up, her voice ringing through the church. Leave that girl alone! One by one, the other widows stood with her. 8, 10, 12 women, all rising to their feet in solidarity. We've all lost someone to men like you, Matthias, Ada said, her voice breaking with emotion. Daughters, sisters, friends, we've stayed silent out of shame, out of fear. But we're done being silent. Doc Carlyle stood next, pulling papers from his folder. I've treated 6 women from New Eden in the past 3 years. Every single one had injuries consistent with abuse. Broken bones, burns, strangulation marks. I documented everything, and I said nothing because I was afraid. His voice filled with shame. But I'm speaking now. He handed the papers to Ruth, who took them without taking her eyes off Matthias. Matthias stood again, his composure slipping. This is absurd. I have served this community for years. I have given you schools, hospitals, charity. And this is how you repay me? By listening to the ravings of one disturbed woman? She's not raving, a voice said from the sister's pew. Everyone turned. Another sister, an older woman with gray streaks in her hair, had stood up. She's telling the truth, the woman said, her voice shaking but clear. Everything she said is true. He locked me in a cell for 3 weeks when I refused to marry a man who paid $500 for me. Another sister stood. He burned my hands when I tried to write a letter to my family. Another. He told me my parents were dead when they weren't, so I'd have no one to turn to. One by one, all 12 of the other sisters stood, each one speaking a piece of their truth. The dam had broken. The silence had shattered. Matthias's face went from pale to red to purple. His carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. You ungrateful whores, he shouted, his voice echoing off the church walls. I saved you from the streets. I gave you purpose. I gave you food and shelter and meaning. And this is how you repay me? He pulled a pistol from inside his coat. If I can't have you, no one will. He aimed at Celeste. Time seemed to slow. Josiah moved like lightning, throwing himself in front of Celeste, knocking her to the floor. The gun went off with a deafening crack. The bullet hit the wall where Celeste's head had been a second before. Chaos erupted. Silas drew his gun. Ruth fired from the back, hitting him in the arm. He went down screaming. The other 2 men with Matthias pulled weapons, but townspeople were already moving, tackling them, disarming them. Matthias fired again wildly, hitting nothing. Josiah rolled to his feet, his own pistol drawn. Drop it, Matthias, never! Matthias backed toward the door, still pointing his gun at the crowd. I built this. I created this. You can't take it from me. He turned and ran out the church door. Josiah was after him in an instant. Celeste grabbed a fallen pistol and followed. Ruth shouted after them, Josiah, wait! But they were already gone. Outside, Matthias ran toward his carriage, but the horses had spooked at the gunfire and bolted, leaving the carriage useless. He sprinted toward the edge of town, toward the tree line. Josiah was faster, younger, stronger. He gained ground with every stride. Celeste ran behind them both, her heart pounding. Matthias reached the trees and plunged into the forest. Josiah followed without hesitation. The forest was thick here, the undergrowth tangled. Matthias crashed through it like a panicked animal. He emerged into a clearing and stopped, whirling around. He still had the pistol. Stay back, he screamed at Josiah. Stay back or I'll kill you. Josiah stopped at the edge of the clearing, his own gun trained on Matthias. It's over, Matthias. Drop the weapon. Over? Matthias laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. It's never over. I have money. I have connections. I'll be out of jail in a week. And when I am, I'll come for all of you. No, you won't. Celeste stepped into the clearing. She had the pistol in both hands, aimed at Matthias. Matthias's eyes widened. Celeste, my dear girl, you wouldn't shoot me. You're a woman of God. I was, Celeste said quietly, but you taught me that sometimes God needs help from us. Matthias's gun hand wavered. Put that down. You're not a killer. No, but I'm not your victim anymore either. The sound of horses came from behind them. Ruth and a dozen townspeople burst into the clearing, all armed. Matthias looked around wildly. He was surrounded, trapped, his empire crumbling around him. For a moment, Celeste thought he might surrender. Then she saw his face change, saw the decision in his eyes. He raised his pistol one last time. Josiah and Ruth both fired. Matthias went down hard, clutching his shoulder and leg. Not fatal shots, deliberate. They wanted him alive to face justice. Ruth walked forward and kicked the gun away from Matthias's hand. Brother Matthias Crow, you're under arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, human trafficking, fraud, and about a dozen other crimes I'll think of on the way to the jail. Matthias looked up at her, blood seeping through his clothes. You can't prove any of it. Ruth held up the ledger that Red Skywalker had taken from Matthias's office during the chaos. Your own records prove it. Names, dates, payments, everything. Matthias's face went gray. He looked at Celeste, standing over him. I saved you, he whispered. You were nothing. I made you something. Celeste's voice was cold as winter stone. No, you tried to break me, but I saved myself. And now I'm going to save the others. Ruth's deputies hauled Matthias to his feet and half dragged, half carried him back to town. The crowd parted to let them through, silent and stunned. In the church, the sisters huddled together, some crying, some in shock. Ada and the other women were already organizing, bringing blankets, food, comfort. Pastor Whitfield stood at the altar, his face in his hands, weeping. When Celeste approached, he looked up. I'm so sorry, he said. I knew. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, and I did nothing. You spoke today, Celeste said gently. When it mattered most, you spoke. That's what counts. Margaret ran to Celeste and threw her arms around her, sobbing. Thank you. Thank you. I thought I'd never be free. Celeste held her tight. You're free now. We all are. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Ruth launched a full investigation. The ledger was entered into evidence. Doc Carlisle's medical records were added. One by one, the sisters gave their testimony, each one adding another nail to Matthias's coffin. Several prominent men in the valley were implicated. The mayor resigned. 3 town councilmen were arrested as accomplices. The owner of the general store fled town in the middle of the night. New Eden Ministry was raided. In the cellar, they found the chains, the cells, the evidence of everything Celeste had described, and worse. Photographs were taken. Evidence was cataloged. Matthias's trial was set for 3 months later. But everyone knew he would never see freedom again. 2 weeks after that Sunday, Celeste stood on the porch of Murphy's boarding house, looking out over the town. It was evening, the sun setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The sisters had all been relocated. Some went home to families they hadn't seen in years. Others stayed in Harper's Ridge, finding work, starting new lives. Margaret had decided to stay, working with Ada at the boarding house, helping other women who needed shelter. Josiah approached from the street below. He had been staying at the boarding house too, in a room on the first floor, giving Celeste space but staying close. You leaving? She asked. Thought I might head back to the cabin. Winter's coming on. Need to prepare. Celeste nodded, her heart sinking. Of course. But I was thinking, Josiah continued, climbing the steps to stand beside her. That cabin's pretty isolated. Might be good to have it closer to town, in case people need help. A place for folks to go when they're running from something. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe I'm done hiding on that mountain. Maybe it's time to be part of something bigger. Celeste looked at him, hope rising in her chest. What would that look like? Josiah shrugged. Not sure yet, but I figure you've got experience helping people. I've got a place and skills. Ruth's got the law. Ada's got the heart. Between all of us, we could make something real. Something that lasts. A sanctuary, Celeste said softly. A real one this time. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunset. What about us? Celeste asked quietly. Josiah turned to look at her. That's up to you. I told you I'd wait until you were ready. That hasn't changed. Celeste took a deep breath. For 2 years, I was told I was nothing. That my body was the only thing I had of value. That I belonged to whoever paid for me. She looked at him. You're the first person who saw me as more than that, who saw me as a person worth saving. You saved yourself, Josiah said. I just gave you a place to rest while you did it. No, you showed me what a good man looks like, what respect looks like, what it means to be valued for who you are, not what you can give. She turned to face him fully. I'm ready now, not because I need you to save me, but because I choose you. Because I want to build something with you, not as someone you rescued, but as your equal, your partner. Josiah reached out and took her hand, his rough, scarred hand enveloping her smaller one. Equal partners, he said, in everything. In everything. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead rose on her toes to meet him, their lips touched. It was not a desperate kiss, not hungry or demanding. It was gentle, tender, a promise of things to come, a beginning, not an ending. When they pulled apart, Celeste was crying, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. 6 months later, spring had come to the mountains of West Virginia. The snow had melted, replaced by wildflowers that carpeted the hillsides in riots of color. The trees were budding, birds were singing, and the world felt new. The cabin that had once belonged to Josiah alone had been expanded. 2 new rooms, a larger kitchen, a barn for horses. It sat on the edge of Harper's Ridge now, close enough to town to be accessible but far enough away to offer privacy. A new sign hung over the door. Mountain Haven. It was a sanctuary, a real one. A place where women escaping abuse could find shelter, where they could heal, where they could learn skills and find their strength again. Celeste ran the day-to-day operations. Margaret helped her along with 3 of the other former sisters from New Eden. Ada came up from town twice a week to cook and counsel. Doc Carlisle provided medical care free of charge. Ruth stopped by regularly to check on everyone and provide legal assistance. And Josiah built. He expanded the buildings, taught the women carpentry and survival skills, and stood guard over all of them with fierce protectiveness. On a warm spring evening, a wagon rolled up the path to Mountain Haven. A woman climbed down, young, maybe 20, with a black eye and a split lip. She carried a small child on her hip. Celeste walked out to meet her. Is this, the woman began, her voice shaking, is this the place where women can be safe? Celeste smiled gently. Yes, you're safe here. What's your name? Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. Come inside. We'll get you and your baby settled. As Sarah walked toward the house, another woman appeared at the door. Then another, and another. 5 women now called Mountain Haven home, all of them healing, all of them learning to be strong again. That evening, after Sarah and her child were fed and asleep, Celeste stood on the porch watching the sunset. Josiah came out to join her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. That's the 47th woman we've helped, he said, handing her a cup. 47th, Celeste repeated. It's a start. It's more than a start. It's a legacy. Celeste leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Did you ever think, she asked when I knocked on your door in that blizzard, that it would lead to this? No. I thought I'd give you shelter for a night and you'd move on. Josiah paused. Best thing that ever happened to me was answering that door. Best thing that ever happened to me was having the courage to knock. They stood together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Inside the house, Sarah held her sleeping child and looked around at the other women. Women who had been broken and were healing. Women who had been told they were worthless and were discovering their value. Women who had been caged and were learning to fly. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something unfamiliar. Something she had almost forgotten. Hope. 1 year after that Sunday in Harper's Ridge, on a crisp autumn morning, Celeste stood in the small cemetery on the edge of town. She was alone, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers. She stopped at a simple headstone. The inscription read, Anna Schmidt, beloved daughter, gone but not forgotten. Celeste knelt and placed the flowers on the grave. I kept my promise, Anna, she said softly. I brought him down. He'll never hurt anyone again. The breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. I think about you every day, about how brave you were to try to escape, about how you paid the price for his evil. But your death wasn't in vain. Because of you, because of what happened to you, 47 women are free now, and that number grows every month. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. Rest easy, sister. You're remembered, you're honored, and you're avenged. As she walked back toward town, she saw Josiah waiting for her at the cemetery gate. He didn't ask where she had been. He just fell into step beside her, his presence solid and comforting. They walked together down the main street of Harper's Ridge. People greeted them warmly. The town had changed. The corruption had been rooted out. New leadership had been elected. And Mountain Haven had become a source of pride, a symbol of the community's commitment to protecting the vulnerable. That evening, back at Mankaton Haven, there was a knock on the door. Celeste opened it to find three women standing there, a mother and two daughters, all with the same haunted look Celeste had once worn. "We heard there's a place," the mother said. "A place where we can be safe." Celeste smiled and stepped back, opening the door wide. "There is. Welcome home." As the women entered, Margaret appeared to help them get settled. The other residents gathered around, offering blankets, food, comfort. The house filled with quiet voices, with the sound of women helping women, of broken people coming together to heal. Josiah stood in the doorway watching. Celeste joined him. "We're making a difference," she said. "You're making a difference. I'm just building the walls. You're building more than walls. You're building a future. We're building it together." She took his hand, and they stood there, watching their sanctuary fill with life and hope and healing. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, soft, gentle, covering the world in white. But inside Mountain Haven, there was warmth, there was safety, there was love, and there was redemption. Not the kind that came from prayers or penance, but the kind that came from action, from standing up, from speaking truth, from helping others climb out of the darkness you yourself had escaped. Celeste Rourke had walked into hell thinking it was heaven. She had escaped through a blizzard that should have killed her. She had found a mountain man with a good heart and a guilty conscience. Together, they had brought down evil and built something beautiful in its place. She would never be Sister Celeste again. She was just Celeste now, a woman who had been broken and had put herself back together stronger than before. A woman who had been told she was worthless and had proven them wrong. A woman who had been saved and now spent her life saving others. That was her legacy, not the habits she had worn or the vows she had taken, but the lives she had touched, the women she had freed, the sanctuary she had built. And as the snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled warmly inside, Celeste finally understood something she had been searching for since Lucy died. Purpose, real purpose. Not the false purpose Matthias had promised, but the kind that came from looking another suffering person in the eye and saying, "I've been where you are, and I made it through, and so will you." That night, as Celeste prepared for bed, she pulled the wooden cross from her pocket. She had carried it every day since escaping New Eden, but she had never put it back around her neck. Now, for the first time in over a year, she did. Not because she had returned to blind faith, not because she believed everything she once had, but because she had redefined what the cross meant to her. It was no longer a symbol of obedience or submission. It was a symbol of sacrifice, of carrying burdens for others, of laying down your life so that others might live. Josiah knocked softly and entered. He saw the cross around her neck and smiled. "You're wearing it again." "I am, but it means something different now." "What does it mean?" "It means that sometimes you have to go through hell to understand heaven, that sometimes you have to be broken to become strong, that sometimes the faith you lose is replaced by something better, something real." "And what's that?" "Hope. Not hope that someone will save you, but hope that you can save yourself, and then help others do the same." Josiah crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who had found each other in the darkness and had chosen to walk into the light together. The next morning brought another knock on the door, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Women kept coming. Broken women, desperate women, women who had heard whispers of a place in the mountains where you could be safe, where you could heal, where you could start again. And every single one was welcomed, fed, sheltered, healed. Mountain Haven grew. More buildings, more staff, more resources. It became a model. Other towns started similar sanctuaries. The movement spread, and at the center of it all was a woman who had once believed she was worth nothing, who had offered to sell herself for a warm bed, who had been told by a good man that she was worth everything. Celeste Rourke had been saved, not by faith or prayer or divine intervention. She had been saved by truth, by courage, by love, and by the simple act of one person standing up and saying, "This is wrong, and I will not be silent." That was her legacy. That was what she would leave behind. Not a name carved in stone, but lives changed, women freed, hope restored, and in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything. 5 years after that terrible winter, on a warm summer evening, Celeste and Josiah sat on the porch of Mountain Haven, watching the sun set over the mountains. The sanctuary had helped over 200 women by now. 3 had gone on to open their own shelters in other towns. 1 had become a lawyer, specializing in cases of abuse and trafficking. Another had become a doctor. The legacy was spreading, growing, touching lives in ways Celeste could never have imagined. "Do you ever regret it?" Josiah asked. "The path you took? Everything you went through?" Celeste thought for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No, because if I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this. All those women who found safety here, they wouldn't have had a place to go. So no, I don't regret it. I survived it. And I turned it into something good." She looked at him. "Do you regret answering your door that night?" Josiah smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new women seeking help, new battles to fight. But tonight there was peace. And 2 people who had found redemption not in running from their pasts, but in facing them, in using their pain to help others, in building something that would last long after they were gone. Sister Celeste Rourke had walked into a storm seeking death and found life instead. And she had taken that life and given it meaning, purpose, legacy, not through suffering, but through rising from it, not through being saved, but through saving others. And that made all the difference.